When I looked at the ingredients panel, I was seeing things that I don't see in other energy drinks like the Shiso, the elderberry, like not having taurine.
Took 4 years, four and a half years before we made we ran a first run of product. The CEO sort of paused for a second and he was like, you're making an energy drink, right? That's impossible.
Your career in production, now you're building the CPG company with, an industry expert like your dad, and then you being a full-time dad to 3 daughters.
Things got really tough after having a baby, a newborn baby, and trying to launch a company.
Hey, Christian.
Hi, Scotty. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here. And I do want to start with your story and kind of how mōcean really kind of evolved into being a business. So I know you were in the hospital, 2 a.m. in the morning, daughter's being born, and then you end up in the gift shop looking at a wall of energy drinks. A lot of choices. I know I've been there recently, a couple of years ago. So tell me what happened in that moment when you were just...
Yeah. So my first daughter was born in the middle of COVID. And so it was a pretty stressful time for everybody, right? And having a baby during that time didn't make it any easier. But my wife was in labor, or the beginning stages of her labor. And so she had gotten her epidural and she was able to actually get a little bit of sleep. And so I had asked her, like, is it all right if I go get some caffeine and I'll be right back? And she let me, and I went downstairs, and I didn't want coffee. I don't really like to drink coffee late at night. And maybe I'll have a cup of coffee in the morning is kind of typical, but I wanted something more refreshing, sparkling. So I kind of knew that I was looking at like a soda or an energy drink, and standing in front of this cooler, looking at the energy drinks, I just sort of, I joke that it was kind of like that in my head. It was like that Blink-182 song, like "What's My Age Again?" Like looking at these candy flavors or come in neon colored cans. And, I grew up with Monster, Red Bull, Rockstar. They were literally handing cases of their product out when I was in college 20 years ago. But I was literally about to become a brand new father, and I just felt like these brands didn't represent sort of that life stage that I was at anymore, and that I'd outgrown them. So, it was about a year later that my father and I started talking. My dad was looking at, retiring from his role in a few years, and he's like, I think, I'd like to try and put something together. I think there's something in the energy space that maybe we can work on. And I had told him this story and about the night my first daughter was born. So that was kind of what sort of was like, all right, well, let's do a grown-up version of an energy drink. What would that look like? Right. And something that isn't super sweet, doesn't have candy flavors, doesn't have a ridiculous amount of caffeine in it, and doesn't have a whole multivitamin worth of vitamins and minerals added to it, and 1,000% of biotin, like the RDA. Why would you need 1,000% of anything for your recommended daily allowance? So we just said there's got to be a smarter way to approach this and not be a copycat in this industry. And so that's where mōcean came out of, was this sort of desire for my dad looking at what he was going to do after he moved on from his role, and me not having a beverage background but being beverage adjacent, because my father's been a brewmaster for almost 37 years now. But I have a lot of marketing insight and consumer insight. My background is in advertising and film production. And I'm also someone who consumes energy drinks. So I bring a lot of the branding for mōcean to the table. And my dad is much more on the production. He's extremely talented when it comes to producing any kind of beverage, especially at scale. Not that we're at that point yet, but we're ready for it. He knows all the problems that could happen and at co-packers. And so that was the impetus for it. I think we sort of really started meeting on a regular basis, I want to say September or October of 2021. And we officially launched our website. It was kind of a soft launch last November of 2025. And we just got on Amazon a couple weeks ago. We're still in the very early stages. We're excited for, the possibility of where this brand can go. And we have a lot of ideas for the future. And so, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Yeah. I love that. Sounds like you guys have quite a bit moving there, but it's a really honest origin story of the product, right? And I think it's probably one of the more honest ones that I've seen. It wasn't made up in a whiteboard session or some kind of market research deck.
Right.
It was actually just you, a sleep deprived dad at a hospital,
Yeah.
looking at those cans and just saying to yourself, yeah, I'm a little too old for this candy nonsense.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but you touched on it too, before Emotion, you weren't really like in beverage at all. You were a producer doing film, TV, things like that, working and doing some productions for Audible. I mean, that's a pretty different world. So how was that like looking at that, having that conversation with your dad of, hey, maybe we could do something in this space? What was that like having the background you do and then going like, all right, let's try something different here?
Right. Well, it's been really great is I never really expected I'd be working with my father, and he was, he is the guy who he started in the Anheuser-Busch Research Brewery. I think it was like a day after he graduated college. And, he's worked for all the big brewers. His the last role he had that he retired from last July was the brewmaster or VP in charge of technical and brewing quality at Mark Anthony Brands. I know I'm butchering what that title was, but essentially he was the guy who formulated White Claw. He made Mike's Hard Lemonade, Cayman Jack, but White Claw is the big one for sure. So he's somebody who is, for what he does, is kind of a legend within the industry. And so it's been really humbling and exciting to be able to work with him, learn from him. And I wasn't sure initially what I was going to be bringing to the table, because beverage is my dad's, that's what he's been doing for 30 plus years, right? All I knew is that I had a distinct idea of what there was a gap in the market that we could fill. And with my background in advertising and film, I even started professionally working after graduating from college as an actor. I studied acting in college, and so I'm much more creatively geared. And I dual majored in college in marketing and acting for theater, for stage. And so marketing has always been something that's been really fascinating to me, and what brands can do with it. And so when we started putting this together, I said, I think I really want to focus on the brand, the feel, the look, the tone, the personality of our brand. It was really speaking to me. And on the side, I'm learning, all about how to put liquid in a can and ensure, the pasteurization temperatures, time and temperatures. And, there's so much that I've learned just in the short period of working with my father. But it's been good. I think that I think the evolution for me to work in the beverage industry with my father hasn't been as hard as I thought it was going to be. And I feel like I'm still able to bring a lot to the table. That my dad's not really an energy drinker, so he wants to put an energy drink company together, and I'm the one with the most experience drinking them for 20 plus years. So I think that's it's been a great collaboration so far, for sure.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it sounds like there's some real dynamic there. I mean, having the guy who basically formulated White Claw as your co-founder is not
Yeah.
a bad starting position.
Yeah, it
So
definitely allows us to have more conversations and opens a lot more doors than I think otherwise we would have. So, we recognize the fact that he did that, and he worked hard for that, and now we're leveraging that expertise to try and open up doors for us.
absolutely. And you touched a little bit on kind of like the brand positioning. And so I want to talk about what motion actually is, because when I looked at the ingredients panel, I was seeing things that I don't see in other energy drinks like the Shiso, the elderberry, like not having taurine.
Mhm.
Walk me through like you guys' thinking behind having that type of formula.
Yeah, so it was from the very beginning, we took a whiteboard approach to making the drink. We didn't say, "Oh, we're just going to copy what Celsius is doing," right? We said, "What are the minimal amount of benefits we want the drink to have?" Obviously, if it's an energy drink, you're going to need caffeine for a stimulant. We want some adaptogenic benefits for it. And so what are the ingredients that are going to get us to sort of the pillars that we had put up on this board, and said we want this drink to have provide immunity support. And so, and my father is Filipino, and so when he was growing up, his mom had a cupboard filled with elderberry and echinacea and all these different kind of herbs and she would whip up these concoctions when he was sick to make him better. And so there's certainly an influence of that where his heritage played a role in the kind of ingredients that we wanted to have. We knew it was going to be different than what was on the market. Shiso was an interesting one because energy drinks historically have had taurine since Red Bull. Pretty much everybody includes taurine, and you think it's kind of, you just assume that it's going to be in an energy drink at this point. But we didn't want taurine, and I'll come back to why we didn't want it. But we wanted something else to be what we called our hero ingredient. And so we came across this Asian botanical herb. It's related to mint, but it's called shiso. If you've ever been to a sushi restaurant and they serve you the sushi on a plate, usually depending on where you go, but a lot of times they'll put the sushi on shiso leaves. But it's well known in Asia, in Asian countries, China and Japan. They drink it as a tea. It has gut benefits. It does have adaptogenic benefits to it. And honestly, nobody was using it. And we said, there's enough benefit here that we could differentiate ourselves. We could appeal to an Asian market, hopefully. And, we could own the SEO on Shiso. There was a lot of, what is the minimum functional benefit we want to get from this drink and how do we get there, as well as keeping our costs of goods down, right? We don't, like I said, alluded to earlier, we didn't want 1,000% of anything, 'cause it's just a waste of ingredients. You're just going to be pissing that out, at some point during the day. So with Shiso, it provided a unique benefit. It's got a unique sort of citrusy taste to it. So it does have some effect on the flavor. There's not enough to totally, when you try our drinks, you can't really just tell like, oh, that must be the Shiso I'm tasting. But, we wanted something that was going to be different on the market and was going to make us stand out. And so that's where that came from. With taurine, we never included taurine from the very beginning. Last May, there was a research that was published in the research journal Nature. It's one of the most widely known research publications, peer-reviewed. And there was a study published that was linking taurine. It was tested on lab mice. Taurine supplementation was increasing blood leukemia growth in the lab mice. And so I bring that up because it's not, I can't say with 100% certainty it causes cancer. That's not what I'm saying. But the truth of the matter is it appears as though there needs to be more research at the very least, right? But it does, it will feed cancer cells. Cancer cells will eat it up. And we think that's a real problem. The energy drink market, 99% of the energy drinks on shelf contain taurine, and we think it's an important conversation to be having, we want people to be able to make the best choices about what goes into their body. And if the benefit of including taurine doesn't outweigh the possible risk of using it, why would we include it then? Absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of how we took our approach. And I talked about how, candy flavors was kind of a big no-no for us. So when it came to the flavors of the drinks themselves, we wanted them to be fruit forward, but not super sweet, and nothing that would make a kid say, ooh, it's Skittles, I'll take that. And then they're pounding 300 milligrams of caffeine and then they're bouncing off of the walls. So that's in a nutshell, what we try to do when we were formulating our original 4 flavors.
Yeah, definitely a bold move for sure. Not including the taurine. Like you said, 98% of all energy drinks have that in it. And then, substituting that with Shiso, most people are probably not very familiar with what that is.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a couple of places where they've probably seen it. They just didn't even know. Yeah. But yeah, I'm very, very in the know with Japanese culture and the use of Shiso and all the health benefits that come along with it. Is a great substitute that is significantly better than taurine. But another thing you mentioned too was adaptogens, like the word adaptogens. And I want to make sure that people understand what adaptogens actually are, because I think sometimes it can definitely be a little bit of a buzzword that gets thrown around in a lot of things and thrown on some packages. But how do you explain it to someone who's maybe never heard the term before?
Yeah, the way I explain it is that, and I'm using the word in the definition, but adaptogens help your body adapt to the stress that they're feeling, whether that's coming from external forces or internal, it helps to calm the body's immune system down. That's the simplest way to describe what they do.
Yeah, yeah, so not just like a clean energy, but it's an energy that actually is kind of like working with your body instead of just hammering it with stimulants. Like, I'm a huge coffee drinker, and so I drink a lot of coffee, and one morning, I actually substituted one of your drinks instead of well, I still had coffee later that morning, but, just because I love coffee, so I
Yeah.
just absolutely love coffee, but that was one thing about the drink that I noticed, not just the good flavor. One of the favorites that I had was the mango. That was one of mine. My wife loved, I think it's strawberry guava or
Strawberry guava. And you must have had the
strawberry guava
mandarin
or mandarin.
or
There we go.
yeah.
Mandarin. Yeah. Yeah. Delicious. But yeah, there was something about it that was unlike some other energy drinks that I've had where you kind of get a little crazy. Like you can go run, like a 5K for
Yeah.
absolutely no
Yeah.
reason. But it was just like, I felt like I just had a cup of coffee or 2 cups of coffee and I was good for the morning and didn't need anything else. And I think that is that kind of clean energy, those adaptogens of what the ingredients you guys have in there that's actually working with your body. And like you said, not
Yeah.
just hammering it with 1,000, 5,000% of vitamin that you need that day. That's just stimulating the crap out of you.
Yeah. And I think that, we definitely, the flavors themselves, and I'm glad you like the samples, it just, like I said earlier, we're trying to be the more mature option for this category. We're not necessarily saying, we think that we can increase and grow the category rather than just trying to take market share away, right? There are a number of people out there who have given up drinking energy drinks for a lot of the reasons I've outlined. They used to drink them and now they don't. And they're also like my wife, she would never touch an energy drink. She never had one for the entire existence of them. And then she tried ours and she's like, "Oh, I really like this. I would drink this." And so that's how we think we can grow this category is by trying to provide, we're not saying you just need to drink emotion in the morning. A lot of times we talk about how we want to be replacing, like for someone like you, that second or third coffee of the day. Like we can be an alternative to it. And our caffeine comes from green tea, so it's not derived from, it's not synthetic, it's not coffee, and it's got this, you don't get the same jitters drinking our drink because it's not loaded with sugar, and the caffeine level is reasonable. You can drink 3 of our cans in a day and be within the FDA limit. So a lot of it was just about how do we be a more responsible option for maybe a more mature consumer out there.
Yeah, yeah. And the brand voice is really different too. I think your copy is just like genuinely funny. Like
Yeah.
I know somewhere you had something like just enough caffeine to survive lunch with your in-laws, and that's like so real. Or the samples
Yeah.
you sent me, I believe the box said something about putting your grown-up pants on,
Yeah.
and then accompanied that with those extremely cool, and I've never seen before, those snap-on, trouser
The
koozies.
koozies. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
are
That was,
awesome.
I hadn't seen those either. And we wanted to have something that we could give away without, it's those weigh so much less than a can of our product does. But if we're just meeting people and give stuff away, and one of the early sort of it's not even an ad because we haven't run it as an ad yet, but one of the early sort of illustrations that I had put together, graphics, was each of our cans with a different pair of pants on them: jeans, I think nurse scrubs, dress slacks, and maybe khakis or something like that. And it was just this idea of, I think it says on that box, someone finally put grown up pants on an energy drink. And that was us trying to, for people who don't know what motion is about, that we hope that can help explain our positioning in a humorous way, because honestly, we think that humor is a way for us to cut through the noise for all the other brands, right? We don't, it's just my dad and I right now running this business, and trying to do everything ourselves. And we don't have massive ad budgets. We're not working with ad agencies, so we think humor is a way for us to be able to cut through the noise and have a more immediate lasting impact that's going to get repeat consumers to come and engage with us. That's why we put funny copy on the can. I think there's a lot of fun things we have planned for the brand. It's meant to be an ultra premium kind of energy drink offering, but we want to have fun while we're doing it. We always, early on, we talked about the brand itself and the brand voice. We would define it as on this spectrum between Liquid Death and Ryan Reynolds, right? So you've got, Liquid Death really, they did something completely new in the beverage space, started as a meme, and now look at where they are now, right? And Ryan Reynolds is I think really great at doing this sort of low budget marketing that is extremely effective. And it also comes down to his like style of humor, his snarkiness, self-deprecating humor. And I just love that. And so we said, why don't we take some of those elements and try to put it into this brand so that, this is fun for us too. We're not just building this to try and make a quick buck and get out of the business. We want to have fun doing this together. So if we can make ourselves laugh each day at something, then I think we're more likely to stick with it. And I will tease, I don't know when you're going to release this episode, but I will tease that we're pretty excited about what we are doing for April Fools this year. So you'll have to keep an eye out for that, and I can share it with you on as we get to that day. But I'm very excited. My father and I had this idea for April Fools, and we're pretty excited about what we're doing. So
Yeah, that's
I'll leave
exciting.
it at that.
Yeah, I'm ready to see. I think that our episode here will probably come out a little bit after that,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
that's funny. I'm excited to see what you guys do, what you pull off. But okay, so you've got the idea, you got the formula, you guys got the brand voice, which sounds pretty nailed down. What did actually getting it from the beginning, from the idea and the phone call with your dad to actually getting it to market look like? Because I think there are a
Yeah.
lot of people that underestimate how hard that part is of actually getting it to market after you have the good idea and you get the formula.
Yeah. It's definitely tough. And part of it was I'm a full-time stay-at-home dad. I've got 3 daughters now, 3 under 5 years old, under 6 years old, technically. So that's what my full-time day job is, and I live on the West Coast. My father's on the East Coast. And up until last July, he was working full-time, as the White Claw brewmaster. And so he was traveling around a lot, and we would try to sync up our schedules to meet on weekends or late at night after my kids were down, and it was even later for my dad on the East Coast. But it was just a lot of where can we find time, and it took 4 years, 4.5 years before we made we ran a first run of product, and I wouldn't have changed what we did, because I think that we've come to something that we really are believe in and we're excited about. And it took the time it did because we wanted to make sure we were ready to move forward with each step. What initially happened was, and I'll tell you that one of the hardest things early on for us was just coming up with a name for an energy drink that, craft beer has taken every, clever or name, that you could possibly come up with. And so I think we got really lucky when In Motion was something that I didn't, at first I was kind of like, I don't know if I like that. But as I kept thinking about it, I was like, okay, you got the ocean, ocean in the name. We spell motion with ocean and an M. And okay, there's, waves have energy. And the more I kept thinking about it, I was like, all right, there's something here. And motion implies energy, so, and, having a logo made up for it finally sort of said, okay, this is starting to feel real. And we started designing the cans. We wanted a retro modern look is what we call it. We wanted it very simple. We wanted it to stand out from anything else that was on shelf, particularly in the energy drink aisle. There's nobody else making an energy drink that looks like ours. It's meant to look different and really stand out. So we started designing that, and also trying to put together presentation pitch decks and different materials, formulating. So we've worked with 2 different flavor labs. We worked with one in LA for about a year, and I guess a funny story about that is our first call with this flavor lab. We're all like the CEO and his whole team are on this call with my dad and me. We're talking through what we want this to be in this drink, telling them all about the ingredients, the shiso, and the caffeine levels and all of that. And my dad had said, And look, we know people drink energy drinks while they're commuting, and so they're going to be sipping on these for a couple hours. So it has to taste great cold, but also needs to taste good as it warms up, because that's how a lot of people are drinking these things. They're not just pounding them. And the CEO sort of paused for a second and he was like, you're making an energy drink, right? That's impossible. And my dad, without missing a beat, just goes, then we're talking to the wrong people. And then the CEO starts backpedaling. He's like, "Whoa, let's talk through this some more." And that's one of those things that we just have particularly my father has a very distinct idea of what needs to work for the consumer, right? And what the consumer is looking for from their beverage. And he's not going to sacrifice on that. If we need to find somebody to get us where we need to be, then we're going to find somebody else. And so, formulating was tough. You're trying to figure out how to mask all the caffeine. The more caffeine you have, the bitter the drink is. The more vitamins you include, the more bitter the drink is. So then you need to sweeten it up. Are you going to use real sugar? Are you going to use artificial sweeteners? Are you going to use natural alternative sweeteners? And so there's this sort of balancing act that's always going on. It's trying these different variations of levels of sugar versus stevia, different types of sweeteners. At the end of the day, the first day, I remember in the flavor lab, my hands were like shaking because I was only taking little sips, but I was taking so much over the course of the day. I've never had that kind of reaction to caffeine. So I would say that it's an iterative process, and once you have the formula, then it's a matter of, okay, you got to source the ingredients. Is the can ready? The can label ready for production? Who are you doing a digital can? Because that's probably or a sleeve. You're not at scale, so you're not doing a direct print can yet. And so you have to go through all these different things. Who's going to supply the cans? Where are you going to co-pack? And where do you anticipate trying to sell in early on? Having a go-to-market strategy is equally as important as the product itself. So it's been a real learning experience. I'll say it's been really enjoyable for me. I love learning new skills. I think I would be a perpetual student if I could. But learning about a new industry, learning the ins and outs of it, and how things work together, what a DSD distributor is versus a broker, and selling direct into retail, like all these different things that I never really thought about before. It's been a very eye-opening experience, and I'm very grateful that I get to do it with someone as knowledgeable as my father.
Yeah, and you nailed quite a bit of it. There are so many complexities inside of that space, from the idea to the go to market. I mean, the manufacturing, the compliance, the packaging,
Yeah,
everything that you named too is and then like the nuances inside of all of those. There's so many different silos that happen there. And having the idea in 21 and then actually getting to your launch in 2025,
right.
and even having those conversations, like you mentioned with that one CEO, like, oh, that's impossible. It must have felt really good when within 2 weeks of you guys' launch, you guys were named the runner up for the, what was it? The new beverage showdown, I believe.
Yeah, we were one of the finalists in the New Beverage Showdown. We actually were accepted into it before anybody had even tasted our product. All anybody knew about it was I think an article or two that was written, but we had applied and we got accepted to the New Beverage Showdown at BevNet Live in Marina del Rey last December, and we made it to the finals. And it was a great experience. We got to sample a lot of drinks for the people who attended and got a lot of great feedback. A lot of that feedback we got and we said, all right, let's make some changes to our can. So our can design is going to be updated a bit to make it more apparent that it's an energy drink. The caffeine level is going to be called out right on the front of the can. The can design largely is the same. We're just tweaking it to make it more apparent what our offering is initially to consumers, just so they know it's an energy drink. But it's been an exciting, since we had the first article written about my father's retirement and what he was doing next. It's been wild, the response that we've gotten, the traction with distributors reaching out to us. Major sports organizations are asking us if we want to sponsor them, and it's humbling, and it's somewhat overwhelming, and we're trying to make sure that we move at a pace that is smart, we don't burn through all of our capital, and that we make we make the right strategic moves, whether it's with partners, distributors, brokers, so that we can really have the best shot at giving this thing legs.
Yeah, yeah, there's a beautiful chaos around that too,
Yeah.
right? And like having that kind of balancing act of like growing but not growing too fast and kind of making those decisions. But it sounds like you
Yeah.
guys have quite a bit going on in the background. Where's that distribution for you right now, or and where are you guys taking it? Because I know from last time we talked, you guys are meeting Whole Foods sprout ingredient standards, and that's a
Yes.
pretty specific lane to go after too.
Yeah, and that was intentional from the very beginning. We knew basically this is personal my personal opinion. I have at least 4 years ago when I went to Whole Foods and was looking at the offerings of energy drinks there, I bought all of them and there wasn't a single one that I liked. And so it's also one of the hardest grocery stores, retailers to get into because of the standards that the high standards they have. So we took it as a personal challenge to ourselves, say, okay, can we make let's make a drink that's Whole Foods compliant and actually tastes good. And so that was always probably the predominant sort of decision that was made early on for that led to us choosing specific ingredients and leaving out other ingredients. So it was very intentional to make something that could meet a rigorous standard so that it gave us some flexibility down the road where we didn't have to change our formulation a whole lot. So it's been very, very interesting learning about the different formulations, what the requirements are for different retailers. With distribution, we just got on Amazon listed a couple weeks ago. So that's kind of we're going to be selling a lot of our current inventory through that. We signed with our first broker a few weeks back and we're getting ready to getting ready for sort of the summer pitch season, summer reset. And so yeah, I think there's a lot of things that are going to be happening as this year progresses, and I'm hopeful that we'll have some announcements towards the summer or fall about retail availability or availability in convenience stores or things like that. So I think it's going to be an exciting year. A
Yeah,
lot of
that's amazing.
unknowns. There's still a lot of unknowns, but I'm very excited about what the future holds for us.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty usual.
Yeah.
You always gotta take it day by day. You never 100% sure where things go. But I think like Whole Foods, Sprouts are kind of that better for you or good for you type of brands and kind of that shift in the consumer market in food and beverage to kind of, we're leaning a lot more towards that kind of better for you stuff. And then, the better for you energy segment has been growing. I think it's something like 13 to 15% year over year annually.
Yeah.
And you guys are pretty early in what feels like a real category shift there in that energy space. Does that feel like you guys are at an advantage because of that? Or do you guys kind of feel like maybe you're educating people a lot of the time on why they should even care about a better for you energy?
I don't think that I don't think so far, and to be completely honest, we haven't done a whole lot of samplings yet. That's one of the things on our radar as well for doing over the course of this year is being able to sample at retailers that we would have agreements with, or events and things like that, so we could get direct feedback, brand awareness built, and get people's critiques, what they like, what they don't like, and as we continue to iterate. And we always talk about how there's no sacred cows, and if we need to make a change, then we're going to make a change. And so I think there's a lot that is still unknown for where we're going to be even a few months from now. I think there's a lot of hope around what we can accomplish together, and we know we're going to have to grow our team at a certain point, right? Because we can't, the two of us can't handle everything ourselves for forever. So it's really about us trying to make sure we're making a calculated decisions about how to best move forward and expand and evolve the brand.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. There definitely becomes kind of a tipping point where you have to really start building out the teams, you start to scale. And sometimes again, it's that kind of balancing act of is it too soon? Is it too late? Like, oh, we needed somebody 4 months ago, or man, we could have probably held off like 6 weeks and brought this person on. But I kind of want to move into talking about the stuff that typically doesn't make the press release, right? So you leaving, your career in production. Now you're building the CPG company with, uh, an industry expert like your dad, and then you being a full-time dad to three daughters. What's the reality of doing all of this actually look like for you day to day? Because I know how it is running my own business and having twins, and but thankfully my wife has stepped in to be the full time caretaker, really.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's certainly been challenging, and I would say that, my youngest daughter, she's 9 months, she was born June 22nd of last year, and my dad announced his retirement in July, so just a couple weeks after. And then press started being released about what we were doing together. Our first production run was end of October, early November. And so things got really tough after having a baby, a newborn baby, and trying to launch a company. And that was a really tough period of time last year for sure. And I was up late, trying to, I was not getting a whole lot of sleep already, but I was up late trying to do work on my end to get things, moving forward with different branding aspects and, finalizing the can labels and making advertisements to go in BevNet magazine and stuff. And so it's hard. It's hard when you have, yourself, or, in my case, I had my father, but, his skill set is very different than my skill set, and there are just certain things that are better suited for me to tackle or sort of manage than what his expertise would bring. And so I don't have a good answer for the I don't feel like I know currently, or if I ever will, the sort of answer to how do you have a work-life balance? Because I don't see this slowing down for me at all in terms of what we're going to be doing with motion. I just see it's going to reach a tipping point and start to really, really ramp up. That's the hope. But so a lot of it is just trying to take it day by day. And I'm somebody who internalizes a lot of my own emotions and feelings. And I've definitely had to try and remind myself to be more present, right? Because it's really easy to be obsessed with, oh, we've got to make these changes to the new versions of the can label, and my kids are waiting for me to play with them, and I'm going over emails and stuff. And so there's definitely, I have to remind myself that first and foremost, I'm a dad. I'm here for my kids, and I want them to have a father who pays attention to them and, plays with them, loves them, shows them affection. I don't want to be completely obsessed with my work. So there's definitely been, it's challenging when you have three. I think I would have said it was a lot easier when I had two that were 5 and 3 years old, 5 and 2.5 years old at the time, I guess. But when you throw an infant in the mix, that's a very exciting decision you're making in your life.
absolutely, absolutely. And I feel you on that. I started my advisory company maybe within 6 months of when my twins were born. So I've been thinking about
Yeah,
it for a little while, and then I went to my wife and was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Like, what do you think?" And my wife, being my wife, was like, "Yeah, you should try it. Give it a shot. Go for it. See what happens." And like,
and I
I don't
I
know if
do
that
think, yeah. Sorry.
no, I was gonna say, I don't know if that makes her crazier than me, but, um, at that point in time, just leaving my corporate job and yeah, I think you kinda touched on it too, like, making su trying to, like I don't think there's really a thing of, like, a work-life balance when you're starting a company or trying to scale or build a company in its early stages when, you don't really have a lot of the resources to bring in a full team and start
Right.
being able to delegate tasks and things like that. And I found that out very early that there were days I would spend, 14 hours on my computer doing stuff and like,
Yeah.
occasionally here or there she needed help or called to me, I'd be, up and helping her out. But there always is something that we can be doing and working on. So then we do it.
Right.
And then next thing you know, you're like, oh my God, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I should probably go to bed now.
Yeah.
And so I actually had to formulate a schedule for myself, which sounds so ridiculous being a grown man, but I had to, like, okay, this is your designated time. You wake up, you go work out, you come back, you do some work, and
Yeah.
then you have breakfast, hang out, do some more work, do some calls during this period of time for your calendar. This is it. And then now, obviously, the podcasts, I typically have certain days and times that I record. So it's like
Right.
keeping it kind of balanced, but it is really difficult. And I don't think, that's the whole reason I started Behind the Skews, because I don't think a lot of people actually talk about what
Yeah.
happens behind the skew and what that looks like of how you got to where you are and what you're doing and building motion.
Yeah, and I think that it sounds like, for me, having my wife has been a huge support, and it sounds like your wife as well has been a huge support. If I was a single dad, like I don't know, like how this all
Yeah.
would work. And I'm also fortunate that my mother-in-law lives, relatively close by. So, there are some days where I need to go, flying to a flavor lab in Cincinnati, right? And or I need to go to a conference. And so I've got a good support structure for what I'm trying to do. I don't have a full-time nanny, and I don't think I could even I don't even think I could afford one. Having the right kind of support and people who believe in what you're doing in a way that allows them to give you the space that you sometimes are just you need some quiet time, or you need to just get down, put your nose to the grindstone. And like, I think that having that support is also a huge part of what allows someone like me in particular to feel like I can keep going.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, having a support system is always a good thing. It's always super nice to have, and yeah, I have it with my wife and my parents and my in-laws. They're all amazing. Not a lot of people have that, so
Yeah.
we're pretty lucky guys. But
Yeah.
Christian, if there's maybe, maybe there's a founder out there listening to this who they have a product, they have a really good idea they believe in, but maybe they're just struggling on, I don't know, how to tell the story of it, right? I mean, you came from storytelling before you came to beverage. So what would be your advice to them?
For me, I've worked in a lot of different fields. Mostly, I would say they've been in creatively geared. And what the thing that I've always found that has worked the best for me is to follow my instincts. And I think that starting a beverage company, starting a CPG brand, starting any company, it's tough because, and it's a you're putting yourself into a very vulnerable state, right? Because it becomes an extension of you and your ideals and, your persona and what you value in the world. And for it to be successful, I think you absolutely have to, like, it has to be part of your DNA. That the feeling of, this is a product that I believe in because I want this. I always talk about how I'm going to be, or the biggest customer of my own drinks, because I'm making this for myself, as much as anybody else. There's a direct need that I felt I had in the market. So that in a way made it easier to sort of see the brand and know how to develop it, or at least have a guiding light for how to move forward with it. So, you know, you can't just, at least it wouldn't work for me. I think you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to start this kind of company." And I think you really have to believe in what it is you want to do and what you're trying to create. It has to be in your blood cells. I feel fortunate that I feel that way about what we're doing right now, because it also just makes it a lot easier to keep going. Just like I was mentioning with having, my wife and, family to support, having that sort of unshakable belief in what you're doing also keeps me going.
Yeah. Well, Christian, this was a really fun conversation. Love the brand, love the story. There's a lot we unpacked there, and probably so much more we could do. But before I let you go, tell everyone where they can find Motion, follow you along the website. Now that you can buy it on Amazon, we have some socials, some other places they can buy it as well.
Yeah. So our main website is www.drinkmotion.energy, and motion is spelled MOCEAN. So it's ocean with an M in front of it. You can also search for Motion on Amazon. Like I said, we're now there. So we have 4 flavors listed there. We'll add a 5th flavor later this summer, and we will add a variety pack probably around the same time to Amazon. You can buy a variety pack directly from us through our website right now if you'd like to try all 4 flavors. And our main social account is Instagram, at Motion Drinkworks, MOCEAN DRINKWERX. So kind of a unique spelling to Drinkworks. But yeah, those are kind of the main places to find us. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to speak to anybody who has a question or wants some advice. So, yeah, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your wife reaching out and helping to get this set up. But I appreciate the conversation and the thoughtful questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And to everyone out there, go find it, go try it. And Christian, thanks for being on Behind the Ski, man.
All right, thank you, Scotty.